Welcome friends to Farm Fresh Designs 59. In today's video, I've got several neutral Christmas projects and a couple of very elegant projects as well. On my first project today, I'm using a Redesign with Prima mold, and it's called Wood Nutcracker. Now, I haven't decided when I get started which one I want to use from this particular mold. And I'm using Amazing Casting Resin. And I actually buy mine at Hobby Lobby because it's cheaper than buying it on Amazon. And if you've not used resin before, it has two parts to it. Part A is a clear liquid, and part B is kind of a yellowy liquid. And you mix equal parts, and then you need to be ready to stir it up. And in the beginning, it's a little cloudy. And then when it becomes clear, then that means it's ready to pour into your molds. So it sets up in about 10 minutes and it comes out white. So what I like to do is I like to take my molds outside and I just go ahead and spray them with a clear coat, and that just is like putting a primer on it. Now the main colors I'm going to be using are red, black, and silver. And the red color is a Waverly chalk paint color, and the name of it is called Lacquer. And it's a really pretty Christmas red, but it's a little bit darker. And then I just put it on several spots on this particular Nutcracker. Part of it is on the little armband, and then the little triangle in the front is part of his belt. And then there's a little piece up at the top on the hat that I paint, and those parts are red. Now, the next color I use, it's actually a silver metallic paint that I get at Hobby Lobby, and it's called Treasure Gold, but it's the platinum color. And so I go ahead and put that on the base and on several different parts of this particular Nutcracker. Now, I like this metallic paint, but a lot of times it takes two coats of it, especially if you're putting it on resin, because it doesn't go on like chalk paint. It's a little bit thinner. Now, the last color that I'm using is Waverly chalk paint in the color ink. And I just finish out the different parts of this mold in black that I want to be black, because there's parts of it that I just want to keep just plain white. So you can choose to go ahead and use some white chalk paint on those white spots, but it's not really necessary because it's already a pure white when it sets up. But now I did go ahead and paint the extra parts white, because I'm going to be using some clear wax on it and some dark wax on it later, and I just know that that will adhere to chalk paint really well. And I don't know if it would adhere to just plain resin. So I'm just going to kind of do with what I know is going to work. Now, this is a piece of wood that I think I got at Hobby Lobby. And I'm actually using the back side of it because on the front side, there's like a little lip on it, and I don't want to have to try to cut this transfer off in those particular parts. So I just use the back side because it's completely flat. And this is a Redesign with Prima transfer called Harlequin. Now I go ahead and sit it down, and I use the little stick to transfer it on. And I know that I'm going to have to cut off different parts of that, especially around those corners. But to keep me from messing up, I just go ahead and put one straight piece on it. And I know that it's going to be wasting part of it on the parts that I know I'm going to have to cut off. But I would rather waste just that little pieces of it on the corners than to have to measure it incorrectly and then have to start all over again. And then I just use the transfer tool to go all the way down. And as I'm going down, then I'll pull that plastic up as I continue on my way down. Now you'll notice that those little curves are kind of jagged, and it's because I'm going to have to go back and trim off that transfer that's hanging off to the side. Once I get the transfer all put on, then I'm going to use that plastic that it is adhered to, and I'm going to rub it over that transfer, and that's called burnishing it. Now I'm using some DOS air dry clay, and this is the IOD mold, and I believe it's Trimmings too, and it's the larger piece on this mold, and I really like it because it's just so intricate, and it's really fancy and elegant. And so I'm going to be putting this air dry clay in it. And with the IOD molds, they have like a little lip around them, so you can just push that clay in with your thumbs. But I like to go back with like an old gift card or a credit card and make it really flat on the back. And that's what I'm doing now. And then I'll just take those little extra pieces of air dry clay and I go ahead and put it back in my Ziploc bag. Now I'm using Titebond Thick and Quick. And I don't normally like to use my fingers. I usually have got a silicone little stick that I put this on with. And so I know that I'm going to not need that whole piece. But once again, I would rather just have a little bit extra hanging off to the back side of it, because that way I can make sure that the piece of the mold that I want to be in the center is exactly where I need it to be. Now, this is a Redesign with Prima mold, and it's really old, and it's a little bit like the Dainty Flourishes mold. It's just a lot of little intricate pieces. But now with this particular mold, because these pieces are so intricate, it's a little difficult to use air dry clay. And so I'm using hot glue. And if you've not used hot glue before, your hot glue gun needs to be at least 100 degrees. And this particular hot glue gun has a really tiny nozzle on it. And so that one is the one I like to use, especially on this mold, because I need to be able to get into all those little teeny little parts. And when you use hot glue, I'm not going to tell you an exact time that it sets up, but it's pretty quick. And then it's going to come out clear. And so once again, I'm not really sure which pieces I'm going to use on this particular part of the project. And so I just go ahead and make several different pieces that I think I might use. And then the extra ones I just kind of put back because I'll use later. Now, they came out clear, and so I'm just using Rust-Oleum linen white chalk paint to paint these. And because I don't want to have paint all over my fingers, then I just take like a little toothpick and I press it down into that mold, and that keeps it from moving while I'm painting it. Now, this last mold that I'm using also on this project is a Redesign with Prima mold, and it's got several different clock faces on it. And this particular mold is going to be hanging off up at the top of this piece. And because it's going to be hanging off, then I need it to be permanent. If I made it with air dry clay, it could possibly break off in the future, and I didn't want it to. So that's why I'm using resin on this particular one. Now, I could also use hot glue, but this is a larger piece, and honestly, it would take so long, and I'm just lazy, and so resin doesn't take as long. So now what I'm doing is I've got all of my pieces, I've got them all painted, and I've got them all where I want them to be, and once again, I'm just using Titebond Thick and Quick to get them all glued down. Now I'm using Dixie Belle Clear Wax, and I know the little can is, the insides of it is white, but it goes on clear. And I'm going to be putting a dark wax on top of it. So the reason you need to put the clear wax on is it kind of sets like a primer for the piece, so that when you put that dark wax on, you can rub off what you don't want to be on there. If you don't put the clear wax on and you just put the dark wax straight on a piece and you don't like it, it's not going to come off. So I'll let that sit up for just a little bit. And this is actually some Debbie's DIY black wax. And I just am brushing that on, and I'm just wiping back the parts that I want to just not have so much dark with the paper towel. And what I really want is I want that dark wax to kind of settle in the little crevices, because that will bring out the detail. And then all I do is I go over the entire piece with that dark wax. Now, I'm not really a fan of using just regular kitchen paper towels. I actually like to use white shop towels, and I get those at Home Depot, but I'm out, and I just haven't had a chance to go and get some more. But typically, I just like the shop towels that I get at Home Depot when I'm using wax particularly. Now, the reason that I'm brushing over that Harlequin Transfer with the dark wax is I want it to all be real cohesive and it to look right. If I had just brushed the dark wax on to the different molds, I don't think it would have looked as good. And then I'm going back on this clock that, if you'll notice, it's kind of hanging off up at the top. And I put the dark wax on that, and I wipe it back so that it settles in the crevices a lot. Now, this is the inspiration piece that I found on Pinterest, and I couldn't see the person's name. There was just a little mark on it that was called Queen, and that was all that I could find as far as who added that to Pinterest. But I didn't go exactly by what they did, but I used a lot of the different parts that she did, and I just added to it. Now, this really long frame is something that I picked up in the Target dollar spot recently, and it had like a little wood Christmas tree that was sitting on it, but I didn't want that, and I knew what I was going to use it for. So I just used some scrapbook paper that I found at Hobby Lobby, and it's kind of a mottled gray paper, and I measured it and I put it down with a glue stick. And then I'm going to be putting this whole mold right into the inside of that frame, and I'm just gluing it with Titebond Thick and Quick, because I wanted to add it to like a little frame just to kind of finish it off. Now, I didn't have to, and it would have been a little shelf sitter, but because the piece of wood is not just straight across, I thought it would be easier if I just added it to a frame. And I love it. I just think this is so, so pretty. And this may be my favorite piece today. It was a lot of work, but I really, really like the way that came out. So, what do you think? And are you a fan of like nutcrackers that, people put out at Christmas time? Now, if you're liking the video today, make sure to hit the like button. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel, we would love to have you as part of our family. Now, this next piece is one of those, I guess it's maybe wood, but I'm not really sure. And it's one of those pieces that I thrifted that you can put different candles in. But it was this hideous color green. And so I spray painted it black. But I wanted to make sure that there was some good chalk paint on it. So I went back and I put some Waverly chalk paint on it. And then I sprayed it with a clear sealer. And this comes from the IOD Transfer that came out in the holiday collection. And this one came from Candy Cane Cottage. And my options were to use maybe one of the bigger transfers that had this floral on it. But because this has 3 different openings that I'm going to be putting some bottle brushes trees in, then I thought it would be better to have 3 separate little pieces. And because they're spaced pretty good on this sheet, then I didn't try to separate them. And then you just burnish it on. And then I'm going to put another clear sealer on it. And these are actually some bottle brush trees that I got at the Dollar Tree. And I spray painted them with Rust-Oleum chiffon cream. And in this picture, they look kind of a yellow, but they're not. They're really more of a cream color. And it looks really good because that cream color matches the cream in the transfer. But here in this picture, it's kind of yellowy. Now, these are 3 different triangles that I had left over from last Christmas. And just recently, I did a video where I took 3 different triangles and I put some clay molds on them, and I painted 3 different colors. And then they had like little wood pieces that made them stand up. But on these 3 pieces, I'm not going to add like a little stand to them. I'm going to glue them together and connect them. So the largest piece and the smallest piece is painted with Rust-Oleum chiffon cream. Now on the large triangle and the small triangle, I'm going to be using some paint inlays, and I'm not really sure when they came out, but they're IOD paint inlays, and the words are in French, and so I don't speak French and I don't want to crucify the words, so I'm going to put it in the description box below, but it's a toile. And so to be able to make it fit, I have to use several pieces to it. And I even use like some little pieces. And so it's kind of a mishmash of different pieces because I don't want, like there's a particular bird that's in this paint inlay and I don't want to use that. I want to just use the florals. So when you use a paint inlay, you're going to put a coat of paint on it, let it dry, put a second coat of paint on it, and then you're going to take this paint inlay, mist it on the back, and lay it down, and then you're going to kind of press it down just a little tiny bit, and then you're going to take mist it again, and then kind of blot off the excess, let it dry for about an hour, and then after it's dry and that paper has become, that makes it look more like paper and it doesn't look wet, then you know that it's dry. And then when you get ready to pull off the paint inlay, you mist it again, let it sit for about 60 seconds, and then you just begin to pull off that paint inlay really slowly. And if it sticks just a little bit, kind of mist it again. And then take those paint inlay sheets and just lay them off to the side and let them dry, because they can be used more than once. Now, even though I have painted that middle tree or that middle triangle with the Rust-Oleum chiffon cream, I go back and I paint it with Dixie Belle Manatee Gray, because this is a good color that matches up really well with that paint inlay. So I go ahead and I paint the entire piece with the Dixie Belle Manatee Gray, and then I'm actually going to be gluing all 3 trees together in just a few minutes. But before I glue them all together, I wanted to add just something a little extra to the gray one. So I'm just using a stamp from the IOD Merry and Bright. And I'm going to be putting that on at the bottom of this gray triangle. Now I have adhered this stamp onto a thin mount, and I stamp it with IOD black ink. And then I know that I'm always going to get a little bit of ink on the edges of the stamp. So I like to go back with the baby wipe and wipe off that excess, just so that it won't accidentally get on my piece. And then once I lay it down, then I keep one hand still while I go around with the other hand, and I just press down the different pieces to it. And then I just pull it straight up. Now I know that part of this stamp is going to be covered, but I would rather the left side of the stamp be completely on there. And then I just use the Titebond Thick and Quick to glue that second triangle onto the bigger triangle. And then I'll go and I'll glue the second one on to the middle one. Now, this project, it changed multiple times while I was working on it, but I'm really happy with the result. And I didn't really want to add these to like a little tree trunk. I just like them the way they are. And if you'll notice the little baby shoe, if you have any of your children's baby shoes, I think they're really pretty at Christmas. to like stick little bottle brushes in. Now, this is just a big glass piece that I thrifted recently, and I washed it up really well. And then what I'm using is Pentart Opal Crackle Varnish on it. And it's going to be like a fine line crackle once it finishes up. So the first piece, you brush it on, and then you're going to let it dry, and you're going to know that it's dry when it turns clear, and that before you put the second part on. And I don't try to go on the inside, I just go on the outside, and I think I go back on the bottom as well. Now it's clear, and now I'm going back on with the second part. And what it does is it just makes it sort of cloudy, but it's going to leave some really fine cracks on it. And then I'm going to be going back, and I'm going to be, whoops, see me about drop it. This little piece is really, really heavy. So I'm going to be putting a mold on it. And the mold comes from the IOD Fleur de Lis mold, and it's the largest Fleur de Lis on this particular mold. And I'm using air dry clay on it. And I'll be adding that on with Titebond Thick and Quick. And actually, I'm just using some little battery candles in it. I'm not really sure what I would put on it if I was going to actually be having a candle on it, because I would be afraid that the heat would melt that glue. So I'm just going to be using some little battery candles in it. And then I'm just going to be putting it on with Titebond Thick and Quick. And can you see those pretty little crackle finish on this piece? And I just lay it on, and I've got something sitting off to one side because it's round, and to keep it from rolling. Then I just kind of let it sit for a pretty good while. And now I'm just going back with Waverly chalk paint in the color of ink, and I'm just going all around, and I'm going to paint the entire Fleur de Lis with that chalk paint. So I get that entire piece painted black, and then I forgot to film the part where I go back over it after it's good and dry, and I use DIY Golden Ticket, which is like a gold gilding wax. And I put that all over the Fleur de Lis, and I also rub it all over this jar because it really brings out the crackle finish on it. And it's so elegant looking. So this could be used at Christmas, or honestly, it could be used any time of the year. And the reason I wanted to put the Fleur de Lis on it is because it doesn't have to be used at Christmas. And I think it turned out so, so pretty. And I love this crackle finish on it. Now I'm going to show you two different ways to style it. One is just sitting off by itself, but look at that gold gilding wax. I just think it really brings out the detail on it, and it also brings out that crackle finish. And then I also add it onto just a thrifted candlestick. Now, if I wanted to, I could always glue this glass onto the candlestick. But because I'm going to be putting this in my booth, then, not everybody is going to want it sitting up on a candlestick. But if it's something that you're making for yourself, this is an option. But I just think it turned out so, so pretty. So what do you think? Okay, so for my last project today, it's another triangle. And I just have a few left from the ones that my husband made for me last year. And I'm using Rust-Oleum chiffon cream, and I'm painting the sides, and I'm only painting the front for right now. And I'll explain that in just a minute. Now I'm using Titebond Thick and Quick, and I'm going to be spreading that all on the front. Now there is a place, probably about 30 minutes from my house, and it's called the Salvage Shop. And it's a place that I love to go to when I go down that way. And they have buttons super cheap. They have this huge bin of them, and you can dig them out one by one, but that would take too long. And so you just have a big cup, and then you pay by the cup. And so I like to go down there and just get a couple scoops of it. And then all of these are just, they're white on the back, but they're kind of a creamy color on the front. And I'm going to be putting these buttons all over the front of this triangle. Now, you can use any kind of glue that you want. You could use Mod Podge or school glue, but because this is going to be going in my booth, I know that Type Bond Thick and Quick is such a permanent, really good quality glue that I just wanted to make sure that none of them fell off later. And then I just go all over it using little buttons and then larger buttons. And if you don't, have some place like that near your house, but think about it. A lot of times when you go off and you buy like a new shirt or a new jacket, they always have those little extra buttons in like a little plastic bag that they give you so that, in case one of them comes off. Well, if you're like me, you don't lose the buttons on your shirts, but you can just go ahead and be saving those buttons if you want to make something like this later on. Now I go all over it, and then I want to add not a complete second layer of buttons, but I want to add just a few more buttons to give it more of dementia. And then I just kind of put them random here and there, and I go all the way up to the top. But I don't do them as thick as I did on that first layer. It's just enough to where it looks like there's an added layer to it. And then I go ahead and let those set up really well before I go on to the next piece. So on this one, I'm actually going to give it a tree trunk and a base. So I have a little block of wood, and here's my base that I had cut out. And I just use my drill to drill a little hole in it. And because I'm in the craft room, I just have that little extra block of wood so that when I drill that hole, I need to drill it all the way through this base, and I wouldn't want to drill into the table. And then there's my little tree trunk, and I've got my screw, and I make the edge or the opening for that screw just a little bit bigger right there at the opening, and so that I can kind of sink it into that base so that it will sit flat. Now, this is why I didn't paint the back, is because raw wood glues better to raw wood than it does to a painted surface. Because I can always go back and paint it, but I know that it's just easier to glue raw woods together. Now, this is just some gold eyelash yarn that I get at Hobby Lobby, and I just take it and I wrap it around several fingers, maybe 4 or 5 times, and then I've got an extra little piece of that yarn laying down that I'm going to tie it in the middle and turn it into a little bow. And then I've got like a little gold button that I'll be gluing to the center of it. And I'm going to be putting this down at the base of this Christmas tree, or this button Christmas tree. Now, I wanted the top of it to have a little star, so I'm using the star from the IOD Old Christmas Tree mold that just came out. And I added a few little extra buttons to the base of it. But I just think it turned out so pretty. And I love buttons, and I love anything that has to do with sewing. And so I've done these before. I've done these at Valentine's Day, make a little heart. You can use them for a lot of different occasions, but I just think they're just really elegant looking. So what do you think? Now, friends, here are all the projects that I've made today. And I do have to admit, the little Nutcracker is my favorite. But after that, I really have a hard time telling you which one I like the second best, because I like all of the pieces today. So in the comments below today, tell me which one was your favorite, And do you like to use these neutral colors at Christmas as well? But I love this Nutcracker, and I'm going to have a hard time putting this in my booth. It was a lot of work, but I really love the way that it turned out. And remember, you might not have these molds, but you can buy like little ornaments, and you can buy the scrapbook paper that's the Harlequin pattern and make these yourself. So you don't always have to have all these little molds to it. Just create it with what you do have. But I love all the pieces today. So if you like the video today, make sure to give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And I can't wait to see you in the next video for more Christmas items.